Hi, and welcome to Hiss and Tell, a cat behavior and more podcast, hosted by me, Christina Wilson, animal behaviorist. My guest today is Dr. Leslie Lyons, a professor of comparative medicine and the director of the Feline Genetics and Comparative Medicine Laboratory at the University of Missouri College of Veterinary Medicine. Whew, that was a mouthful. We're going to be talking all about feline genetics, which is something that I've always been really interested in, and I have to be honest, I don't understand, so let's get into it. Hi, and welcome to Hiss and Tell. I am your host, Christina Wilson, and with me today is Dr. Leslie Lyons. She is the Gilbreth McLaurin Endowed Professor of Comparative Medicine at the University of Missouri College of Veterinary Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Lyons.
Oh, thanks. Wonderful to be with you, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year to you. Can you just give us a little bit of basic information about your background, your education, all of that jazz?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born and raised in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour south of Pittsburgh. So all my education ended up being at Pittsburgh. A BS degree in biochemistry, a master's in human genetics, and then my PhD in human genetics. And but while I was getting exposed to different areas of genetics in my graduate training, I decided that I wanted to do something called comparative genetics. So I interviewed with several groups and ended up going to the National Cancer Institute, which sometimes was dubbed the National Cat Institute. It started out as the Lab of Viral Carcinogenesis and then changed its name to Genomic Diversity. But so I never actually chose to, even though my last name is Lyons, I never thought I would work on cats. And so I wanted to do comparative genomics, which meant working on a different species other than humans and relating that information back to humans. So like for biomedical models and diseases and things like that. And it just so happens that the NCI worked on cats. And so even then, I had the choice of cats, fish, or cows. And I picked that lab because they had ties with still human genetics and evolution, which I wanted to learn more about evolution. So I was assigned cats.
Oh, okay.
And for your postdoc, and generally your postdoc is what sets your career. And so once that happened, never look back.
Yeah.
Cats are us,
Yeah. Do you have cats at home, or what kind of pets do you have at home,
yes,
if
of
any?
course. I was always raised with a cat. We always had at least one, usually one. And now at home I have 3 random bred cats, born under my porch, and could never capture the female. She was quite smart. So after 3 seasons, I ended up with 3 of her babies. And so.
Yeah. I get it. We have 13 cats that way. So
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, when you live out in the forest, they just start piling up. And
Yep.
Yeah, it happens. Is there something that you find the most fascinating kind of about working with cats on a genetic level that sort of differentiates them from other species?
Well, there's just the fact that, once I sit back and start to appreciate cats, that just overall their entire biology and as a species in evolution, they're generally at the top of their ecosystem. Even though they all come in different sizes for their ecosystem, they're the top predator, the apex predator. And then also just watching them move around your house and they're just like moving artwork and stuff. So once you start to appreciate them, so their genetics are not so much different than many other species. It actually mimics humans quite well, so that's quite fascinating and quite useful for biomedical models. But still trying to understand their behavior is still just fascinating. So it's been quite fun working with cats.
Yep, I get it. I spend all my time trying to understand their behavior, especially the ones in our own house. So I totally get that. So how does your research contribute to understanding genetic diversity among all of the different cat breeds?
Yeah, well, we embarked on a project that specifically was designed to look at the genetic diversity of cat breeds and also of cat populations around the world. And one that's interesting to cat owners and cat breeders, how do they relate to one another? But more importantly for me, and why we did it, is because the genetic resources, the tools that we make, the genome sequence and the DNA markers that we needed to make sure that they worked in all different breeds and populations of cats. So we did this big genetic diversity project so that we could figure out, are we developing good resources for everybody? But a lot of the side information that came out of that is, well, where is a Persian cat really from? And where is an Abyssinian really from? And are these cats from where we think they are? And most of the time they are. So most of your Southeast Asian cats are your Siamese and your Oriental and your Burman and your Korat. Those fit perfectly well. Japanese bobtail does not. The bobtail definitely comes from the Far East and from Japan and those regions, but the rest of the cat doesn't. And so it's hard to say, well, we know the tail came from there, but the rest of the DNA is not saying that. And then most of the other cats are Western European derived, but your Mao and your Turkish Angora, Turkish Van are definitely Mediterranean breeds of cats and stuff. So that's pretty cool that you can actually tell some regional origins of your domestic cats, whether they're a breed or not. And then also we can figure out which breeds are related to one another, which ones are genetically diverse enough that, are healthy breeding populations, where other ones we kind of have to worry about.
Right.
And,
and that leads me into my next question, which was, in terms of genetic health, are there particular breeds that you think need more attention or genetic monitoring?
Well, that's two different questions. So
that's fair. Yes.
Yes. So, absolutely. There's some breeds that need some genetic help.
Yes.
And what we have to keep in mind that is, if you have low genetic diversity, that is not always a death sentence, because that has meant you probably already purged all the bad things in your population. So there are many populations that have low genetic diversity and are perfectly healthy. But what we worry about is when the new case of the flu comes along, when the new case of coronavirus comes along for cats, will your immune system be diverse enough that you can fight that off?
Right.
And so that's what you worry about with low genetic diversity, is some type of new insult to the population. So you could end up losing a good chunk of the population, but then the rest survives and expands again. So cat breeds that we worry about are definitely, I first started this with a project on Havana Browns, and they wanted to know, are we genetically diverse enough? And I said, well, okay, from our new markers that were developed by Marilyn Minotti Raymond at the NCI, from those markers, they look like they're pretty low. But how do they compare to the rest of the breeds? We don't know. So then we started this whole project on looking at all these different breeds. And so fortunately, when I said they were low compared to a lot of the different breeds. But even lower were the Burmese and the Singapura and things like that, where breeds that are kind of taken off the streets, such as Siberians, Norwegian forest cats, Maine Coons, Manx cats. Those have very high genetic diversity, rivaling random bred cats. And so they're hard to put as a breed, because their genetics is so much just like a Western European cat.
Right.
So it's hard to say, are they Manx or are they a Western European cat? Well, they're a Western European cat, but it's hard to, unless you type them for the tail, then okay, Western European cat with no tail, that's a Manx,
Right. Yeah. Got it. So let's move into talking about what I think a lot of people want to learn more about, which is feline coat color genetics. Can you give us a little bit of just a basic overview, and then we can jump into all of the different studies that you have had your hand in coat color genetics?
Yeah, well, cats are marvelous. Everything you need to know about genetics, you can learn from your cat. And even some of the earliest geneticists back in the early 1900s, when they first rediscovered Mendelian genetics, looked at cats and said, hey, look at that. A lot of orange cats tend to be male, and a lot of tortoiseshell cats tend to be female, and look at that, a lot of white cats tend to be deaf, and these cats with these blotched coat color patterns, their parents can be normal, but then they're blotched. So cats were early used to really highlight that many mammals had Mendelian genetics.
Right.
And so most of the major cat coat colors and phenotypes like curled ears and no tails have been identified. Not all of them, but most all of them, all the major coat colors. And so you can remember them by going through the alphabet. A is for agouti, B is for brown, C is for color, D is for dilute, E is for extension, F is for fold, G is for gloves, and da 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 da. So really there's an assignment for most every letter. And our lab has helped to find several of the coat colors, but a lot of the curly fur types as well. And at this point in time, what forensic people would love to do is you find a DNA sample and you would love to be able to genetically type that for DNA sample and know what the assailant looks like. If you did that with cat fur, you can do it because we know all the colors for a cat. So even if you found a white fur, you could tell whether that was a dominant white cat or a cat with bicolor like Sylvester the cat, or whether it was, you can tell whether it's like a Siamese and that white cat is actually a very light cream or something like that. So cats can't, be careful cats, you can't get away with any crimes because you can actually see what you look like. And that's what forensics wants to be able to do.
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny. I love the idea that, we all know that cats are out there actually committing crimes. So
yeah,
not even really a joke. They're just being, or just in our house, just being annoying. Yeah. So do you want to really, I don't want to say drill down, but really talk about how the gene expression works in most orange-coated cats being male and most tortie cats being female? How does that work?
Okay, so why do we have the scenario where orange cats tend to be more likely males and tortoiseshell cats should be females, right? And that's because of an interesting process called X inactivation. Also known as Lyonization. Mary Lyon discovered this, who I would love to track back to England to see if I'm related to her in some way. Yeah, that would be way cool. But so the fact is, female mammals have 2 X chromosomes and males have an X and a Y. And this is one coat color in cats that's actually what we call sex-linked. It's on the X chromosome. So you have a gene that is on the X chromosome, and which has recently been published. So it's a gene that's called RGAP, some number. And so that gene, we're not sure exactly how that works, but we now know it's a new gene involved with the pathway for pigment production. And so when it's normal, you just have a normal colored cat.
Right.
And when you have a mutation, this 5kb insertion deletion, then that affects the gene and the regulation of the gene and pathways downstream. And that will make everything into this lighter color, orange coloration. So now no matter what base color the cat is, it's now going to be changed to an orange hue in some way. And since males only have 1 X chromosome, statistically, it's more likely if you have 1 X, you only need 1 X with a mutation that has orange on it, and you're going to look like you're an orange cat.
Right.
Where if you're a female, you need both X chromosomes to look that way. And when both do, then the female can be orange as well. But when the female cat has a normal X and an orange X, then this X inactivation takes place. And so in every cell of our body, one of the X's gets turned off. We inactivate it, the females do. And long ago, that's how you used to actually determine if someone was male or female. You'd do a buccal scraping and you'd look for this bright fluorescent body, and it was called the bar body, and that was the inactivated X chromosome. And so you would say, that person has to be a female, they have a bar body. And so that still happens, and cats have that. So in cells that the orange X is inactivated, that means you're going to see the black pigment. And then vice versa. When
Right.
the black X is inactivated, you'll see orange. Now, that starts very early in embryonic development and stays consistent. So a tortoiseshell cat doesn't change
Yeah.
its tortoiseshell pattern. But then also people always want to know, what about those cats with that straight thing down their face and one side's orange and one side's black? Is that two cats that have been squashed together? No, that's how your body develops. Your body, the cells migrate from the dorsal, from your central notochord, and they move from the back to the front, and they close in the front. So you have two halves to your face. One half comes in and it has the orange X turned off, so that's going to be black, and the other one's going to be orange, and you get this perfect line right down the middle of your face. So if you think about children with cleft lips, or if you've ever seen little babies born with little umbilical hernias, those are known as midline closure defects. They're very common and can just be accidental. And cats have them too. When you see that little white locket and that little white belly spot, that's a midline closure defect. And so that's why these cats have that perfect line down their face. They're generally not two cats mixed together, which can happen.
Yeah.
Which can happen. That's called a chimera. And if you find a tortie male, that's likely what has happened, is during the early development of embryos, maybe two fused together, and you have an XXXY male.
Right.
Generally, they're sterile, but you can get, and it's not as uncommon as you think.
Yeah.
So that means there's probably lots of mammals, lots of people that are that way too, but we can see it with a cat because you can see the coat color.
Yes.
So it probably occurs more than what we see, because if the cat doesn't have the orange, you're not going to be able to see that it's different.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So that's happening to people too.
Oh, I'm at totally.
Yep.
I mean, it's happening to all mammals, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
yeah,
all
exactly.
mammals.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to love what we were just talking in the lab about the TV show House.
Oh yeah.
And House actually had an episode where the person was a chimera.
Oh, that's cool. I need to rewatch that show. That was a good show. So, not to go on too much about cat coat color genetics, because I'm sure that you talk about this all the time, but I know that you also were an author in the Salmiak coat color paper.
Yes. Oh, yeah, the salt and pepper thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, as a person from Finland, this is very exciting for me. So, can you tell listeners a little bit about this new cat coat color that has been discovered?
Salmiak. It's not very widespread, so
Right.
it's found in Finland, and it's an interesting kind of white patterning on the cats, and part of them have this salt and pepper type of look where some of the hairs are white. Now, that's not to be confused with roning. So there's something known as roning in many species where some of the hairs are black and some are white as well. So we know that in horses and cattle and other species. This is not that. And this is the gene known as KIT, and it's the same gene that causes dominant white and also causes bicolor and the Van pattern, and also the gloving in Burmans. And so it's a new DNA variant that is affecting the regulation of that gene, which is leading to this coat color. So that's a very interesting part, is that we're starting to find more and more that, we used to always think just the action part of the gene was the coding part, just the exons of a gene. And if you have a mutation in the exons, boom, you got it. Well, that's true. Boom, you got it. But half the time we can't find the mutation in the exons. So we're now starting to find that there's these crazy mutations that are either in the introns, which controls dominant white and white spotting, or outside of the gene, which is such the case in Salmiak, that affect regulation. And so we're finding that things that affect regulation, which are harder to find, affect a lot of our body processes.
Did they tell you that salmiakki is actually really disgusting salty licorice that we eat?
Oh,
in
I
Finland?
tried it.
That's what I was asking. I was wondering if anyone gave you any. It's so bad.
I was just there for our cat and dog meeting, which is sponsored by Purina. And so every 2 years we have a feline and canine International Congress on Feline and Canine Genetics and Genomics, and that's hosted by Purina. And so we had that meeting, and this year it was hosted by Dr. Lohi in Finland.
Oh.
And they gave me some of this licorice candy, and it was the most foul thing I think I've ever. And I'm watching them, and they're going, no, this is like really good, and they're putting it in, and they're completely eating it.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I literally, it was not something I could swallow.
No, I used to prank my American friends when they would come to visit me there, and I'd be like, here, try our traditional candy. And then I'd be ready with like my old, film camera, because this was 800 years ago, ready to take their picture to watch their faces change from like politeness to like, I can't physically have this in my mouth anymore. And they would spit it out with like drool. And I have so many pictures of my friends just like, bleh. Because if you don't grow up from birth eating that, absolutely not. But
I guess it's kind of like a pickled herring, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, you don't want it. Don't ever, if you go back there, don't eat a fish in a can. Like, don't get near any of our traditional foods. You want to avoid that. But just didn't know if you'd been tricked, and it turns out that you
I wasn't tricked, but I was told to try it, and they said you might not like it, and
they knew you wouldn't like it.
Yeah,
they knew. Nobody likes that stuff. Okay, anyways, so then lastly, let's just quickly talk about the albinism in domestic cats, and exactly what is that, because I think a lot of people may think that, oh, my white cat is an albino. Like, how is that different? And what were kind of the key insights that you found when you did your studies on albinism in domestic cats?
Yeah. Well, so the term albinism generally means lack of pigments.
Right.
And so, however, we generally associate this with the taillessness mutations, which are the mutations that cause Siamese, Burmese. I think now we also know mocha is involved there. And then at least 2 different varieties of complete albino cats in which they look completely white are also identified. And historically that they would be called pink-eyed albinos. Well, that's a bit of a misnomer. What's actually going on is that the eyes are so light blue that you can actually see the reflex of the retina in the back of the eye, which has a lot of blood flow and stuff. And so then it looks like they're pink-eyed, but no, they don't have pink in their eyes whatsoever. Their blue eye color is really, really, really light. And this occurs absolutely in humans as well. And so dominant white is kind of a type of albinism as well.
Right.
But we generally historically link the term albinism with the taillessness mutations. And so we know that some of these mutations are just sensitive to heat. So what we call heat shock proteins. And so if the temperature is just a tad, like a tenth of a degree different, that will turn the gene on or off. And so where a cat is cooler, you think you go out in the snow and where do you get cold? Your nose, your ears, your fingers, your toes. And so where the cat is cooler, the gene is working. And so you get the normal coloration of the cat, which is like a seal point, is a black cat.
Right.
And where the cat is warmer on its body, then the gene gets turned off and you get no pigment production. Now, as those cats get older, just as people get older, our skin gets a bit thinner. It's harder for us to keep warmer. And so you see that Siamese will tend to get darker through their lives in their body coloration as well. So they first start out with these very dramatic points. Well, they start out born as kittens and they come out all white, snow white. People think they're albinos, And then once they start to regulate their own body temperature, remember inside of the cat is 101 degrees.
Right.
Once they come out and start dealing with their own regulation of their body temperature, then you'll see the color starting to come in for those kittens and stuff. And then they tend to get darker with age all over the body. But you can mess with your cat. You can shave its hair, and you could put your name in the cat, and if you put it at the right temperature, the coloration will come in differently until that all sheds out.
Right.
Until you have a complete hair shed cycle, then the cat will have different colors in its hair.
Let's maybe not encourage that behavior amongst everybody. But that's pretty funny, actually. Yeah. We'll see how many people do that.
But that's how breeders do get the very dramatic colorations in their cats, keeping the house temperature a little different.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So moving on from coat color genetics. Good at talking today. Let's move on to diseases and inherited disorders. Can you talk a little bit about the progress that was made in identifying genetic markers for like feline diseases like polycystic kidney disease and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy?
Yeah, cats were doing very well because of the genetic resources we've been able to develop. We have one of the best genome assemblies there are for any species, and that's work really led by Bill Murphy at Texas A&M and stuff, that we have these wonderful resources for cats. So we have the 99 Lives Project, where we take all the genomes that have been produced by other people and we put all the genetic variation into one big file. And then we share that file with everybody. We use that file to also say, if I have a new cat that comes in with the disease, it ought to be rare. So I shouldn't find it in the 99 Lives Project. So the 99 Lives cats tell me what's normal. What is normal DNA variation? And then you add in the one sick cat and you say, look, it has this variant that nobody else has. That's a good clue that is a new disease variant for cats. So we're finding with polycystic kidney disease, Persian cats had probably up to at least 38% of some Persian cats throughout the world had polycystic kidney disease. And now that's way below 5%. So genetic testing has been effective. We did it slowly over time, didn't lose any major catteries, didn't say everybody get rid of all their PKD cats right away. But the idea is to when it's at a high frequency, you want to slowly eradicate so you don't cause other genetic bottlenecks. And so that's true with HCM too. HCM in Maine Coons has a high frequency.
Yes.
So you want to slowly eradicate that. But a complication with HCM is there's more than one types of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And not all cardiac disease is HCM as well. And so 2 major mutations have been found for the Maine Coon and the Ragdoll. It turns out that the one identified for Sphinx cats is probably just a polymorphism for Sphinx cats and doesn't have a real high correlation with disease. And unfortunately for that disease, in humans, there's just hundreds of genes that are known that can cause it. And a lot of people have what we call private mutations. They have their own mutation that causes the disease. And unfortunately, we're probably finding that with cats as well. So the easy ones were identified, and not that it was easy when it was done.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
The more common ones have been identified. And now we're probably going to find that small groups of related cats might have a common variant, but the next group of cats might not.
Right.
And so that's the big challenge with HCM. But we are finding new variants for PKD as well. It's a very, very big gene. And in humans, most families with PKD have their own new private mutation as well.
Right.
And so we have found some Siberians and Bengal cats that have their own mutations. And I just found a couple recently as well. So those will be coming out in the next year or so. So cats, humans, cows, pigs, we all have pretty much the same genes, about 21,000 genes or so, give or take. Some dogs and animals that smell well have bigger repertoires of olfactory genes, or maybe have bigger repertoires of vomeral nasal genes, the ones that smell where you do that weird flamin' response. Yep, right.
Yeah.
So those are for pheromones.
Yes.
And so we see that those repertoires change between species, but mostly you have all the same genes that make a cat, also make a human, and probably it's the regulation of those genes. So back to the regulation story, we're going to find more things that are involved with regulation than the actual coding of the protein for cats. So cats, we have about close to maybe 200 identified DNA variants now. Maybe only a third of those are coat colors and fun things we want to play with.
Right.
But the rest are maybe 30 or so in our breeds. And so breed cats should absolutely be genetically testing for these mutations and trying to get them out of their breed populations. If they're high frequency and it's a small cat breed, then we do it slowly. If it's a very low frequency, then hey, we can get rid of it very quickly.
Right.
So I would think that other than like HCM and maybe one or two other ones, we could probably eradicate most of the known genetic disease from cats within the next 5 years very safely. Now, that doesn't mean we're always going to find new things.
Right.
We'll always find new things, but the things that are there, we could get rid of with just a little bit of work. And so through the World Small Animal Vet Association, which I'm part of, we have proposed to the World Cat Congress that there's 4 things we would love for you to do. And if you're responsible, this is what we're promoting, for you to be responsible cat breeders and owners. And one of those things is genetically test, make it mandatory, and help to eliminate those genetic traits. And so that's definitely high on the list of the things that we'd like to see cat breeders do.
I mean, that would be amazing. That would be amazing to eliminate.
It can be done.
Yeah.
It can be done, and it can be done in such a fashion that it's not going to put anybody out of business.
Right.
And it's just, then once it's done, you don't have to worry about
Yeah.
it, do you?
Yeah, exactly. So speaking to the lay person who's not a cat breeder, obviously, do you think that feline healthcare could be similarly tailored based on individual genetic profiles of a cat?
Absolutely. We're really trying to promote precision medicine for cats. And so that's the new fancy word for humans too. And the cost of genome sequencing is so low now, it's under $500. Now, that doesn't mean in the human healthcare system that's how much it's going to cost, but that's how much I can sequence a cat for, right? And so so absolutely, we can use the DNA profile of your cat to predict its health, and maybe identify the cause of some odd health condition. And if you know the gene and you know the mutation, sometimes you can actually say, hey, there's a therapy for that. And so instead of just treating symptoms, you might actually be able to use a gene therapy, or at least pick the right drug that is effective. And so we're hoping to see, just as part of wellness tests, that cats get like their blood type done.
Yes.
And that's something easy. Most humans know their blood type. That doesn't mean you don't check it when you do a blood transfusion, but it's nice to know your blood type. There's something called multiple drug resistance gene, MDR1, and that's been known to be the gene that affects the metabolism of like ivermectin. So in dogs, 4 white feet, don't treat with ivermectin for worming, right? They're very sensitive to ivermectin, and we see that cats have the exact same mutation. So it's very, very low percentage, but it would be important to know because it might affect drug resistance genes, not affect only one drug, they affect many different drugs. Right. So we would like to see some genetics being part of every cat, random bred cat or not. Go get your blood type done, maybe MDR1 and maybe a few other things. But if you're a breed cat, definitely be checking. And that just came out in a new paper with Journal of Feline Medicine and Surgery, one of the clinical spotlights. And so I wrote a paper on that, and it has a table that says if you're this breed, here's the
Yes,
things you should
I
be
have
worrying
that
about.
paper printed out right here.
There
And
you go.
I
Table
will,
2.
I will post it on the episode page so that if you're interested in downloading and reading, I will post the link to this paper because it is really interesting, and
Yeah.
you can look and see the specific genes for each type of breed and then the diseases that accompany them. So it was a good read.
But I do want to point out that most diseases that we identify, whether they're often found in a single random bred cat.
Right.
And that means they're going to be very unlikely to be ever found again. And so the genetic testing companies most of them, not all of them, most of them do a very, very good job. You know, you should pick the ones that have very good customer service, or maybe ones that have good relationships with universities and contribute to science and research. But also keep in mind that, we do 100 genetic tests for cats. Well, it's probably very unlikely that your cat's going to have any of those genetic diseases unless your cat is sick.
Yeah.
Right. So just word to the wise is just more tests are not always better. And if you do have something that comes back weird in one of what we call these large panel tests, you should, before you make a breeding decision, get that double checked, get it verified, just like you would do in human medicine, get a second opinion.
Actually, I want to ask you quickly a listener question. Is it true that black cats are genetically predisposed to respiratory illnesses?
You know, I have never heard that before.
I haven't either.
I'm
never heard of it.
I'm not sure. I've heard that our black cats maybe tend to be a little more obese. I've heard that before.
Huh.
And because it's the agouti gene, and the agouti gene does have an allele in mice that tends towards obesity. So I can see where somebody has made that leap. But I don't know about anything about respiratory things whatsoever. And in fact, most coat colors in cats are not linked with any types of diseases and traits whatsoever.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's an important piece of information to know.
Except for
I
the
think
deafness and,
right.
Yeah, and white cats. And
Right.
that's a whole nother story why that happens. Yeah.
Oh, do you want to quickly sum that up?
Oh, well, yeah, sure. So
Because I think that's also out there and kind of.
So dominant white cats, they don't have the cells that produce pigment, all right, melanocytes, so they're not in their skin. And so they have all the genes to make pigment, but they don't have the cells. And so those cells are also important for, they go to the back of the eye, and so make the tapetum lucidum. That's the reflective eye layer. And so when you have a dominant white cat, you'll see, or a blue-eyed cat, you'll see that has red eye shine versus the yellow, golden eye shine, yellow-green eye shine of a cat with pigment in their eye. But those melanocytes are also important. So cells do more than one job. And so they're also important for the inner ear. So they migrate to the cochlea, to the inner ear. And when they're absent, then you have deprivation in your hearing. And so that can be sporadic. So not all white cats have blue eyes. And if they have blue eyes, it is more likely that they'll be deaf as well. So that's because of just melanocytes and how they migrate. And it can be kind of chance.
Right. Okay. So what steps can cat owners take to help advance feline genetics research, if any? Most cat owners are not out there doing hard science, but...
Oh, well, I mean, there's wonderful things. Is when every cat is important because it's important to have control cats. It's important to just have the normal cat, right? So that's how what we control everything to, compare everything to. So one, donating money to the 99 Lives Project at University of Missouri. That can be done, and it is tax deductible. So on my website, you'll see a 99 Lives link. You could donate money and also give a blood sample of your cat, and we'll sequence that cat. And that will be part of the controls as well. And so anybody can do that. And then if you're a breeder, we can find these things. If you have something interesting, new that maybe you don't want to talk about, you should come forward because we can find them so quickly. And everything's confidential. If somebody hears about it, it's not going to be from us, right? So, but we can help you find those mutations so quickly that we can tentatively. So, sometimes they are found very fast. And that might be within a year, right? Or we might find it within a month. But when we think back, sometimes projects took 5-10 years to do, right? So now we can do it much more quickly and much lower cost. So, and cats do very well. You take a buccal swab, a Q-tip, and rub it in their mouth. And there's little videos on my website on how to do that properly. It's not a viral swab.
Right.
Don't go way back in the mouth, right? Don't poke the kitty.
Yeah.
Just put it underneath the whisker pad and rub it around. And you can donate DNA that way as well. And so just participating. Hey, I got a cat. I just like it to participate. And I know I'm not going to get anything that's going to help the health of my cat, but it's because it's normal. It's fine.
Right.
But it will help other cats.
What's your website?
It's feline genome at University of Missouri. It's felinegenetics.missouri.edu.
Okay. Wonderful. And for everyone listening, I will have that linked at the bottom of the Hiss and Tell podcast website episode for this episode. So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Lyons, for being on the show and for talking to us about cat genetics. This was so interesting. I wish I can have you back for part 2 and 3 to ask you more questions about all of your papers.
I like the name. I like Hiss and Tell.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I was really trying to find a funny name that would bring people in to do more, feline education. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review wherever you listen. It super helps. For more information and to support our podcast, check out our website at hissandtellpodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram at hissandtellpodcast. Music provided by Cat Beats.